r/Reddit. Teachers of Reddit. What is the worst case of my child can do no wrong have you seen? Once I had a piano student whose mother made him take lessons, even though his heart wasn't in it. For several weeks, he'd come back with exactly the same mistakes as the week before, and with no sign of improvement. I made it comfortable for him to describe weekly practice and his thoughts about taking piano lessons. He said that he had no interest in the piano or any other instrument, and that he pretended to practice to get his mother off his back. I told his mom that forcing him to take lessons was a mistake, that his heart wasn't in it, and that it might turn him against music forever to persist. She said, he's a gifted student and he'd never waste practice time. I simply said that I have his best interests in mind, and that he needs to pursue something he's genuinely interested in, and not be coerced into studying as a result of parental pressure. The boy gave me an appreciative hug, but his mom looked daggers at me as they walked away. I've wanted to get this off my chest for a while now, taught previously, but this is as a parent. Our son, who is 3, is in school. His classmate Winnie and her mom Loisa are the worst people you've ever met. First, Winnie has a restrictive diet for no other reason than her parents want to try it. They will send a list of approved foods and quantities for her with the expectation that all leftovers are to be put in Tupperware and given to Winnie to take home. The food is so odd and weird that we wouldn't eat it anyway, but that's the expectation. If Winnie is at a party, Winnie must win at least 50% of the games, even if there are 20 kids. Winnie must be served first. She must have extra time when playing with children, and Winnie must not be, under any circumstances, told what not to do. The kids of this class have parties and Winnie was invited twice and then not. Her mother flew off the handle and sent a nasty letter to parents about how this was unjust and her darling Winifred was crying at being left out. Her daughter has no boundaries, is unruly, rude, difficult and eats what can only be described as pre-vomit. Her mother runs a small health consulting business and will constantly try the hard sell with you. It's intrusive, invasive and really tone deaf, but she won't stop continually begging for service. She's awful. Her daughter is awful, and they are always at social events. My first year of teaching I taught early elementary, but had to teach a single grade 7 options class, where I saw the students 2x a week for 40 minutes. I had one student who didn't hand in a project, and marked him accordingly. Parent-teacher night came, and mom shows up. She closes the door, spends 5 minutes addressing her son's marks, and asking about whether he could still hand in the project, to which I replied sure. She then spends 20 minutes telling me her son thinks I hate him, and how everyone, and I mean everyone, loves her son. She went on long rambling stories about former teachers, coaches, etc. and how everyone really loves him, and I just really need to spend some time with him, so I would see how special he was. I finally told her I couldn't possibly hate her child because I barely knew who he was, because I spend 98% of my time teaching on the opposite side of the school. Not a smart thing to say, but the rambling stories that we were 25 minutes into what was supposed to be a 10-minute interview, her passive-aggressive nature and the fact that she was so high on her son was starting to irritate me. I asked her what type of reasonable solution she wanted, and she told me my personality was clearly the problem. She then got up to leave, but returned to tell me that though she wasn't a teacher and wouldn't tell me how to do my job, and spent 5 minutes telling me all the ways I'm personally failing her child. Anyway, that was an important first year teacher moment. Never again would I let a parent treat me like that. I was a tar in a kindergarten classroom and had reminded this little kid, 5 meters, in April, over halfway through the school year, about our rule, that we only have healthy snacks at snack time. He started whining and crying about how his mom lets him have cookies whenever he wants. Anyway, the teacher steps in and mentions that he has a delicious looking apple in his lunch bag. He then gets up, throws a chair, and begins to flip tables and tear the class apart, while telling the teacher his mom is going to bring a gun and shoot her. At this moment a threat has been issued, so we bring in the principal. She gets there and begins an effort to talk the student down to no avail. He just keeps going on and on about how his mom has a gun and will shoot everyone at the school, and if we call the police she is going to shoot them too. The mother is then called. No answer. Of course. So we send this kid with the principal and go about our day. After school is over, the teacher, principal and I start putting together an email to the parent. The kid was in after school care, so we couldn't have a chat after school. We just hit the major points of defiance and handling his anger in a more positive manner. I get to school the next day and the teacher shows me the response. The first line read, "Why didn't you just let him have the cookie?" And it went on to say that you as educators are not doing our job if our child is getting as angry as he is. It is our job to keep him from getting mad, and we failed at it today. That day he came in and told us that mommy bought him a new Lego set. Edit. Sorry, it was snack time, not lunch time. My bad. Not a teacher, but I had a fellow student in my high school French 1 class who was a smarmy bastard with spiked blonde hair and a dung-eating grin as wide as his face. Week 1 of freshman year, I'm to work on a project with him, and we go into the hallway to work. I'm sitting there cutting out French language magazine clippings or something. He does nothing, and I try to engage this guy in conversation because I want to make a good impression. He's wearing one of those cartoony "I don't need homework, I have video games" shirts, so I try and talk to him about that. He says he plays them all day. Okay, normal so far. His favorite is Grand Theft Auto 5. Fine, I say as I focus on the task at hand. His favorite thing to do in GTA is to run over prostitutes, which he claims he does for hours on end. He also goes to the strip club, and he talks about what fun the strip club is. We are firmly in the impolite conversation / TMI category, but fairly normal for GTA, right? He then explains how he pulls down his pants and has a good long masturbation session to the strippers. I freeze. Work stops. The detail on his sexual habits is in depth. A real scholarly analysis. He says when he finishes, he releases into a big blue bucket and screams to the ceiling. He keeps the blue bucket in his closet and sniffs it sometimes. Okay, we are done. Back into the classroom I go. A long series of teacher, parent, counselor, and vice principal conversations occur, and everyone is justifiably appalled. But I was told no major disciplinary action was taken as the parents threatened to sue. He was reprimanded, but the parents never took baby Guy Fieri and his bucket screaming habits to the recommended counseling. Not my problem. I just transferred to another French class and pretended he didn't exist. Not a teacher, but actually a student in high school. There was this kid who would bully people for exactly no reason and even went to the extent to make a kid commit suicide. The kid was really nice and also had lots of friends too. The kid who committed suicide. Just to clarify, he would even bully his family. But when the staff of the school eventually caught on to this, they called his mom and the principal talked to them in his office. I was an office aide, which means I just helped deliver papers and stuff, but I'm mostly stuck in the office, where the principal's office is. His door was always open, literally. I saw the principal brought up camera records of the kid bullying people, and the mom went on to blame the principal of faking it and lying to her about her son when she clearly saw his face, and transferred him to another school, and she tried to sue my principal for fraud. While I've never been a traditional teacher, I did give swimming lessons for a short time while in high school. Most of my students and their parents were very appreciative of how I conducted my classes, but there was one woman who seemed utterly convinced that I was doing her child a disservice. The boy in question was afraid of putting his head beneath the water, which is a common enough problem, so we had been slowly working through various ways of helping him overcome that fear. Unfortunately, every single time that his mother was nearby, she would scream about how I had no right to force her son to do anything, after which she would loudly address him, as though nobody else was within earshot. "Are you okay, honey?" she'd ask. "You remember what mommy said, okay? You do not listen to that man. You are perfect, and you do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Okay? Tell me that you hear me." The poor kid would mutter his acknowledgements, then sulk near the edge of the pool until his mother finally left. The good news is that the woman would almost always disappear not long after dropping off her son, leaving me to start undoing the damage. I'd like to think that I still had a positive impact on the boy's life, but something tells me that someone had mistaken swimming lessons for a particularly wet babysitting service. This one's gonna be a hard one to type out. A few years ago, I was friends with this girl who had an older brother. At the time I was also friends with him, and we would talk and get along. My friend had to go downstairs to do something, so I went into her brother's room to watch him play a game for a bit. Nothing unusual, as I often did this if she had to do something or I was bored and she was in the middle of something. After a few minutes he paused his game and closed the door. Now he is about 6 years older than me, so since I was younger and I didn't know what was happening, I just watched him confused. Then came the inappropriate touching etc. I'd rather not go into detail as it's really not a nice memory. Needless to say, I didn't sleep over like I had intended to. My mother found out about it a few years later when I finally had the confidence to tell her. I didn't know what to do after it, so I just kept it to myself. My mother eventually confronted their mother about it, and she went from sweet smiles to rage. She blew up at my mother, screaming that I must have lied and how her sweet little boy would never do that and such a like. She went on and on for about 20 minutes before telling us to get out and cutting all contact with us. My mother didn't take it anywhere, and I have never seen them since, except for the girl and the mother once on my own in a shopping center, to which the daughter greeted me happily and the mother walked off. I think this fits here. Even if not, it's nice to get it off my chest. Not a teacher story, but in the mold. I have two sons 18 months apart. When they were about 8 and 9, maybe a little older, I took them to the Lego store where they wanted to spend their allowance. They each had a pot of money to spend, and they carefully looked at all of the sets that they had been eyeballing for some time, but then they got together and decided that if they pooled their money, they could get one big set and each of them could build parts of it and then have it as a joint toy. They sat there and figured out how much they had, and they were about $12 short, and I told them not to worry about it. I told them that I was so proud that they wisely were spending the money and working together smartly, and that I would pick up the additional leftover amount. As we were talking, we saw a friend of theirs. He was there with his mother. He walked up and said hello, and in his hands was a Lego Death Star, which, if I recall, was about $600. And oh god, was he bragging about it. His mom came over and we were chatting in front of the boys, and she said something like, well, he really wants it, and he emptied the dishwasher last night, so he gets a little reward. We said our goodbyes and made our way to the counter. As soon as they left, my youngest son looked at his brother, then looked at me and said, he's a spoiled douchebag. I taught 6th grade at a private school. Since we are private, we have a specific testing week every spring to assess our students. I sent home an informative sheet describing the rigid schedule we have and when our tests will be administered. Doors have to remain closed and no disruptions were allowed. A little harsh, but it's what we were told to do by administration. If anyone was late, I assured them they can make the test up, but they would have to wait in the office. This kid asked to go to the bathroom. Obviously, as a teacher, I can't say no. I told him he had 5 minutes until the test and he will need to be quick. Needless to say, he was not back in time, so he was sent to the office until the testing time was finished. I received a RENGTHY email that began with, "What is your issue with my child?" They never read my weekly newsletters and just believe whatever their child told them when they got home instead of asking the adult for their perspective. He's an only child with a single parent. He's everything to her. I get it, but was a real tough year. Not a teacher, but I was a volunteer for a science camp back in high school. The science camp was broken into different age groups, and then each week was a different topic. This particular week I had 4th 6th graders and we were doing a "physics is fun" course for the week. The class had about 20 kids. All were amazing except for a set of boy-girl twins. They were so mean and hateful to each other, but when separated would uncontrollably sob and cry out for each other. The solution was to put them at the corner of a table, so close enough to each other, but also a little more space, to eliminate the terrible behavior. This works for 3 days, but on Wednesday we were learning about magnets. We had set a bunch of metal and metal looking objects on the table, things like paper clips, CDs, and coins, and had the kids try to pick up different things with magnet. The little boy decides to grab the CD, break it in half, and run it down his sister's arm, cause a gash that went down the length of her upper arm and even required stitches. I'm obviously mortified. I get the medic on staff and things are being handled the best they could under the circumstances. When the parents came to pick the kids up, they unleashed all hell onto me and the staff, stating their children were angels and never acted this way at home. The parents were swearing, saying they were going to sue me, and told me their son would never do that, and it must have been another student, and that I'm lying. That was my last day there. The camp coordinators apologized so much to me, I almost felt guilty leaving, but I couldn't deal with those parents ever again. First year teaching, I gave a kid detention. Kid was talking too much in class, wouldn't stop, and school policy was to give detention if a kid acted up after a verbal warning. Detention wasn't much, about 30 minutes after school, but since it was a middle school, giving after school detention means I have to contact the parents, since the kid won't be on the bus. Yes, there were other transportation options at this school. Now, he was talking to another kid, so that kid got detention too. So, throughout the day, the kid is begging me not to give him detention, but I remain firm. He broke the rules. I followed school policy and it's my first year. I'm looking to other teachers to be a guide and they say I should stand firm. So, I call mom. Mom is fucking crazy. The kid is Indian, so she accuses me of racism, but that's not so bad. I can understand where she's coming from. That's not what makes her crazy. She then assumes that there was no way for her boy to be talking in class because he is, and I will remember this quote until the day I die, a perfect Christ-like child. Kid was perfect, you see, so anything he did wrong, I had to have made up. Here's the worst part. I was a traveling teacher, which means I have to use other classrooms while that teacher is on plan. It sucks for both of us, but it also means I don't have a classroom phone. If I call a parent, I have to call using my cell phone. She spends the rest of the year harassing me. Kid gets a B on a test that was written for all of the 7th grade English teachers and done on a Scantron. Impossible. He needs to get an A. Kid gets in trouble in another class, calls me to complain about how he couldn't have done anything wrong. Kid has to do homework in my class? No, that's not acceptable. I'm targeting him. Kid gets detention again. Couldn't have happened. He's perfect. He's Christ-like. I had so many 30 to 40 minute calls from this woman that I had to have the principal intervene because it turned into harassment. The worst part was, I really liked the kid. He was a great kid. He was just a 7th grader in a class that had all of his friends and was too big. Also, for some reason, lunch for 7th graders was at 1 PM, which was fucking last for some dumbass reason, and his class was the one just before lunch. Kid was hungry, tired, overworked, and all of his friends were in class. I totally got it. He just couldn't disrupt class. Also, when I say talk in class, I don't mean whispering. He and his friends were pretty loud. They would interrupt me and other kids, and I was a first year teacher too. Like, I made a lot of mistakes, especially with that class. So, I'm not exactly blameless in this scenario. I had a student in 5th grade. He had a history of misbehavior dating back to the first week of kindergarten. He would regularly shout insults at other students, threaten them, refuse to do any work, and on several occasions, yelled at me, and once threw a chair. One day, while we were taking a test, this student was talking. I quietly reminded him that it is against the rules to talk during a test, and that he needs to be quiet. He kept talking. I told him that this is his last warning, and that if he talks again he will need to go in the hall. He talked again. so I told him to go in the hall. He gets up, walks out, and on the way out says, "You're autistic," to me. I wrote him a referral and contacted the parents, explaining the situation. They didn't pick up the phone, so I sent an email, oops, and I ended the email saying that I hope we can work together to help student be successful. I received a rage-filled email back saying that my behavior is unacceptable, that I'm targeting her son and I'm out to get him, and that I will be hearing from her lawyer. This woman is a cop. She went all the way to the district level to complain about me and made up all kinds of lies about me and told the other parents. Oh, and once, after a different incident where he physically assaulted another kid, he was suspended for a day. Mommy took him to Disney World. In the future, save yourself a lot of trouble and never mention specifically what the child has done wrong over an email. This might be a moot point, since it seems like you've already figured that one out. Email messages can be used as a weapon to attack you later, so always make them short and brief. Tell parents simply that an incident involving their child has occurred and you're requesting a meeting. Always inform and involve administration when dealing with uncooperative and accusatory parents. They should be at the meeting and ready to defuse the situation. If something goes wrong, you'll at least have witnesses. In short, don't engage them. It's sad, but so many parents take their child's side over the teacher despite being confronted with overwhelming evidence. It's no wonder many teachers want to leave the profession. On a positive note, it does make you appreciate the non-wacky parents more, and they're the ones who keep you going. Edit. I should have said some parents instead of so many. I know there are teachers out there who are bad apples and shouldn't be in the profession. I got suckered into coaching first grade soccer for the Inca, my daughter's team. Now, I'm aware my child isn't perfect, and I treat her as such. I don't take back talk. I'm a teacher, so I already kind of have a grasp on classroom management. Practices were structured. Games to practice skills. I did just fine. The problem was the parents at the games. Never in a single practice did I have all the girls present. Not once. I was supposed to teach these simple positions, which is fine, but come game time, when you didn't come to practice, certain kids wouldn't know what was going on. Not their fault, but they wouldn't play first, just so they could watch how the girls played and get an idea where they should play when I put them in. I have charts made up of who played when, what position, and kept a timer to split the time and get girls moved in and out. The playtime, even with uneven numbers, was as equal as humanly possible. The extra time always went to whoever played goalie, because they didn't run around too much, so after your turn as goalie you usually got to play an extra 6 minutes. Pretty organized. Pretty fair. I heard nothing but shit from the parents. They didn't think their kid should sit out. She's a starter. So and so got to stay out, but their precious got pulled. I should play their daughter more, because she gets more goals, they don't keep score. Most of the comments were made loudly right behind me while I coached the game. Not one parent thanked me after any game or practice. They all got called to and told they needed a coach and they refused. They knew that was the situation and that I finally volunteered when it looked like the team wouldn't have a coach, and it was first grade soccer. For the why. This wasn't like professional or an expensive private team. Never again. Never again. My parents wanted so badly to be like this. Unfortunately for them, I turned out to be a sissy. I remember once during the brief time I was made to do soccer, my mom forgot my shin guards, so the teenage referee said I had to sit out. My mom was not having that, but she was told on no uncertain terms I could not play without all necessary gear. I told her it's fine, I didn't want to play anyway. My mom told me I was being ridiculous, marched me to her minivan, raced to the store, bought a few pairs of the thickest socks she could find, cut the toes off of all of them, and layered them on my shins, convinced that was just as effective. We race back to the field, game now in progress, and my mom shows off my impromptu shin guard saying he's protected enough, let him play. Ref is like, nah. She's like, you have my permission. He says nah, lawsuits. She then starts taking this guy to task, right there on the field. Coach gets involved. People are staring. I'm standing there embarrassed as fuck wishing I could be unborn. Finally she gives up and storms us out of there. Soccer ended for me shortly thereafter when I straight up refused to go, and when I was dragged anyway I'd just book it off the field. Must have been like 8, 9. Not long after that my parents kind of gave up on me in terms of fostering my interests and extracurricular activities. Good enough for them. They had my much sportier younger sister. Hooray for second tries. 10 points if you can guess my mum's name. Thank you so much for watching the whole video. Please leave a like and subscribe.